Welcome, members of the class of 2023. All right, 2023, you guys, come on, let's go. I'll tell you guys, the students, what I told the baseball team yesterday. We beat what's the school down the road? Pope Francis, yeah. After the game, the coach said, do I have anything I want to add? And I said, it's on. So, you guys, it's on. It's on. It's awesome. The college church is on. So welcome everyone, especially the parents and our esteemed guests, Aaron Bernard, Eric DeAngelis, and Chris O'Brien. And I'll give a more formal introduction of them in a minute. To the parents and guests, whether you're here in person or virtually, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is John Buzang. I'm the Director of College Counseling. WMA has been my home for 22 years, and it has been awesome. This is Maureen Kelly-Chesky, a graduate at WMA and Boston College, and Associate Director of College Counseling for the past 15. I think I did the math. Yeah, right? Goes fast. Maureen gave me my tour when I was applying for a job here, so as a junior. This is Greg Walsh. Greg is in the back. Also Associate Director. Greg is a graduate of Colby College and a seasoned college counselor with more than 30 years of experience at independent schools. And this is Mr. Bill Wells behind us. Bill is a proud member of the Springfield College Pride. Right?
Chiefs, John.
The Chiefs? Oh, well, you were there, right. Bill's the Director of WMA Student Promotions and also Associate Director of College Counseling. And last but certainly not least is Sandy Scott. Sandy has been the office manager in the College Counseling office for 24 years, so she is invaluable. Unfortunately, she has a family commitment tonight and can't be here. As I said, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight, and I'll start by saying that the College Counseling team could not be more excited to begin the college planning journey with you juniors and parents. On behalf of the entire Titan community, I offer our sincere thanks to our panelists for their time and their efforts this evening, especially at this busy time. This has been an unprecedented, that's a word I thought we were going to get rid of, but back, unprecedented time of college admissions. So, you don't look any worse for the wear. Let's see dark circles, so keep it up. So we thank them. Before I introduce our guests, just a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, I ask that you silence your cell phones. That would be appreciated. I don't see any headphones in the parents' ears, so thank you for earphones. And kids, please no earphones. Good. Actually, if we were wearing them, they'd do those orange rock bands. Also, as of last Monday, masks are optional in the chapel, but please, by all means, if you prefer to wear one, please do so. Finally, there is a restroom in the old library, and that's located through the door, immediate right, and it's in that next room. Following the introductions, each of our panelists will provide an overview of the undergraduate admission process at their respective schools and at large. And then we'll continue with about 30 to 40 minutes of questions and answers, questions that have been submitted. But please, if you have your own question, don't be shy. There's a microphone, and please get up there and ask. Okay? It's a pleasure to introduce Ms. Erin Bernard, Associate Director of Freshman Admissions at UMass. Erin has worked at the university for 13 years? 11 years. Okay, 11 years, and oversees the entire application and reading process for first-year undergraduate admissions. Erin has read admissions for the Eisenberg School of Management, in addition to other schools within the university, including applications for computer science for the past few cycles. In addition, she is also responsible for recruiting and high school visits in Hamden and Hampshire County in Massachusetts. Erin's a 2000 graduate of a 2008 graduate of Trinity College, where she played women's ice hockey while earning a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. Erin went on to earn her Master's of Education from Springfield College in 2010 and was the head coach for the Smith College women's ice hockey team for 10 seasons, right? Cool. Please welcome Erin. We're pleased to welcome Mr. Eric DeAngelis from Brown University. Eric began his 20-year admission career.
18.
18?
Not yet.
All right. That's COVID amnesia. So, 18-year admission career at his alma mater, University of Rhode Island, where he received both his bachelor's and master's degrees. He has also worked at Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island, and currently serves as Senior Associate Director of Admission at Brown University, where he's worked for the past 12 years. All right. Good. Eric's admissions work has taken him to all 50 states and 10 countries. He estimates he's read, well, this stat was from a while back, probably 28,000 applications, if not more now. Something like that? Good. All right, good. 28,000 applications in his career, and he has presented at regional and national admissions conferences. Eric has been a member of the executive committee of the New England Association for College Admissions Counseling for many years, and currently serves as the president of that organization. Please welcome Eric. We're also excited to welcome Mr. Chris O'Brien, who joins us from Ms. Kalichewski's alma mater, Boston College. Go Eagles! Chris is currently the Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at BC, where he has spent the past 22 years. Good? All right. He also serves as athletic liaison in the office and is the advisor to the student admission program, guiding over 800 students, student volunteers who give campus tours for Boston College. Prior to joining the admission team at BC, Chris spent 2 years in admissions at Wentworth University of Technology and 3 years at Fairfield University. He earned his Bachelor of Arts from the College of the Holy Cross, right next door in Worcester, and his master's degree from UMass Boston. Chris lives in nearby Westfield with his family and is a huge fan of the Westfield Wings Hockey Club. Right? They got that? All right. Also the Boston College Eagles hockey program and the Boston Bruins. So you guys have a lot of fun. We may be looking for a women's coach. It's like that. Eric and Chris will now give an overview of the admission process at each of their institutions, beginning with Ms. Erin Bernard.
many roles at our respective universities, and so we've had a lot of experience in helping students from all over and in a lot of different ways. So there's any questions you might have, even if it's not specifically related to one of our three schools, please feel free to ask when we get to that portion. But I'll just start by kind of giving you an overview of UMass Amherst, since all three of us are from different schools and leading a state public university. I can kind of give you an overview of how we read applications and hopefully give you some kind of general information in the meantime. So at UMass Amherst, we are a large public school. We have about 22,000 undergraduate students, about 6,000 graduate students. So while that's mid-sized for some of the country, it's pretty big for the Northeast. We're located about 45 minutes from here, and in Amherst, which is a great little New England town. If you haven't been, I highly suggest coming to visit. It's pretty close by. When we are reading applications, one thing that kind of sets us apart is that we do have guidelines that are given to us from the state of Massachusetts that we have to And so if you're looking at any state schools in Massachusetts, they all have these same guidelines. And a lot of it is kind of minimum requirements, and then every school can choose what to do with it from there. So for example, the UMasses, there's UMass Boston, Dartmouth, Amherst, and Lowell, might use it a little differently than Westfield State or Fitchburg State. And then that's even a lot different than the community colleges. So for us at UMass Amherst, our admission standards do tend to be higher than kind of like the minimums in Massachusetts, but you can view a lot of the minimum requirements online. So if you're curious about that, it is public information. One of the other things that I think sets us apart, or that can be different at different schools, is that we do read by major. So one thing that is kind of like the thing that I tend to harp on when I talk to students is about, depending on the school you're applying to, you should really be doing your research on if the major you're putting down, if they make you put down a major, not every school does, affects the way that they read your application. So you're going to find that a lot of the information that you need to know, or you're going to ask from schools and colleges, is going to depend and be different, just to keep it interesting and keep you guys on your toes. It's going to be different at almost every school. So you really need to make sure that you're asking the questions and you're keeping some kind of, whatever, a chart or an Excel doc or whatever you need to keep the information kind of straight, and making sure that you're doing your research. Right now, in your kind of college process, it should be mostly about research. Visiting places, just trying to figure out what you like, what you don't like. You guys live in an area or go to school in an area where there's a lot of schools around here and a lot of different kinds of schools. So you can visit and really get a feel for it, even if you don't want to go to school in Western Massachusetts. You can say, I visited UMass Amherst, really liked the energy of the big school, or you know what, big school's not for me, but I visited, Amherst College, and that was really more my speed, so I'm going to probably start looking at schools that are a little bit more like Amherst College, and you can really get a feel for what you like and what you don't like, and kind of start to shape your list from there. But as you're getting this information, definitely keep track of the requirements and the deadlines and things like that that schools have to offer. A lot of that is going to come into play next fall, but it's always good to kind of get, if you're already going to be doing some of the research, you might as well start keeping track. So like I said, one of the things that I think is important for you to think about if you're going to apply to a school that requires you to pick a major, is to start thinking about what you like as far as academics goes. And the reason this is kind of like my new vendetta is because one thing that I'm seeing at UMass Amherst and some of the other schools like us is that the competitiveness of specific majors is starting to kind of run away from all of the other ones. So the gap between academically what you need to get into as a school management, computer science, nursing is starting to get a lot higher, while the requirement for the other majors is kind of staying the same. So you're seeing students that you know get in, and you might not because you apply to the competitive major, and that's confusing because how are you supposed to know what they apply to? And so that can be concerning to people and upsetting after the fact. So if you know ahead of time what you're doing and what you're applying to, that can be really helpful. I speak to students all the time about this time of year who are kind of like, I don't know, I just put business. I didn't know what to put. And it's a general enough topic. And I didn't know that was like one of the hardest majors to get into. And so it's just something to keep in mind. And really do some research before you decide to do that. At UMass Amherst, we don't have one undecided major. We have undecided within our schools and colleges. So undecided College of Natural Sciences, undecided Humanities and Fine Arts, and a lot of schools will have something like that. So it's not necessarily that you have to choose, a very specific major, but because of the way that the applications are moving, that's kind of like one of the things applying to UMass Amherst I like to harp on. One of the other things to think about is, possible, or switch majors, because let's face it, a lot of people don't know what they want to do at this age, and that's totally fine. A lot of people don't know what they want to do at my age. And that's okay, and it's okay to change your mind, but you want to make sure that you're at a place then that can foster that, and that you like outside of your major. You're not just choosing it just because of this one little thing, that there's going to be more for you at a school in case you do change your mind, which is common and completely fine. So once you've kind of decided your major and you want to apply to UMass Amherst, we are test optional. A lot of schools now are test optional. A lot of schools were test optional beforehand, but I would say, since the pandemic, a lot of schools have kind of leaned that way and are at least doing pilot programs. So juniors this year is our last year of our pilot program, so you will definitely have the option to submit your scores or not. Hoping at some point this summer to get the final decision on what they're going to do moving forward for sophomores and freshmen and beyond. But for right now, and for what you're concerned about, we are test optional. That's another thing to kind of tick on your research. Is a school test optional? What does that mean? Because, like I said, we like to keep it interesting. That could mean something different at every school you apply to. Do you have to submit your scores for certain programs? Do you have to submit your scores to get merit money? It depends. So that's something that you really want to keep track of when you're looking at different schools. The other thing that we require is specific credits. So, and that's another thing that you can start asking about. So, like, you have to have 4 years of math. Is math in your senior year? That's kind of the one that trips people up. So, there's certain requirements. If you apply to business, you have to have 2 pre-calculus. If you apply to to engineering, you have to have physics and chemistry. Those are the kinds of things that you'll start wanting to kind of write down. And you don't necessarily need to get that in the weeds at this point. At this point, you really just want to gauge interest. But like I said, if you're going to start researching schools and you're finding out these differences between schools, it's probably a good idea to figure out a way to keep all that information straight. And then, other than that, we have the big thing to know is we have 2 separate ways to apply. So you can apply early action or regular decision. Early action is non-binding. So early decision is the binding one. That's when you apply to a school and you get in, you have to go there. Early action is similar to regular, it's just earlier. So you apply earlier, you find out earlier, but you still have till May 1st to make your deposit, hear back from other schools, get financial aid packages. It's just an earlier kind of process. And then regular decision, usually in January at some point, sometimes later depending on school. And you find out in the spring, and once again, not till May 1st. So that's another thing you can mark down on schools you're looking at. What kind of application deadlines do they have? And before I hand it off, the last thing that I will say is, one thing that I think is a good idea to start at this point in your college search process is having a time, whether it's one night a week or be the time that you focus on college. And it can be with your parents or your family, by yourself, whatever you think. Just have kind of one specific time that you have to focus on your college search process. And this way, you're blocking out time to do little things like, how about next week I just have thought of my college essay topic, or next week I just asked a couple people to be my recommenders. And if you kind of break it down into these smaller steps, by the time fall comes and it's senior year and it's your last field hockey game or homecoming, and there's all these lasts and you want to be with your friends, and senior year goes by fast. And so if you have a good foundation with your college application ahead of time, then it just puts you in a better spot. It's less stressful, and you kind of have some things under your belt before senior year starts.
Friends, good evening. It's great to be with you. We're kicking off our college search for the class of 27. Are you guys nervous? anxious? Scared?
Okay.
You know, I go through the college application process every year just fine. There's nothing to be nervous about. There's nothing to be scared of. You guys go to WMA. Yeah. Let the kids at Manchog be scared. Let the kids at Williston get nervous. Let the kids at Pope Francis be scared. Alright, so I riled you all up, right? College is the best. I went to college 30 years ago, I never left. College is awesome. But when the subject of college comes up at your house, you probably clam up. And you probably get nervous. Because you don't know if you're going to get in. You don't know if you're going to afford it. You don't know if you're going to have friends. You don't know if you're going to make the track team there. You don't know. But that doesn't mean that you stop. You're here. You have all the greatest things around you to allow you to be a successful college student. So don't get nervous or scared. It's appropriate that we're in the chapel. Now, granted, I work in a Catholic school, but it's appropriate we're in the chapel. You are not walking this path alone. You're walking it with great friends and really smart classmates. You're walking it with great counselors and teachers and your parents. Don't go through this alone. Why people get really nervous, why people don't like this process, part of it is because they have to ask themselves tough questions about whether they're really made up of the kind of, can you live away from home? Are you going to be okay living with a roommate? What it is that am I really good at? What makes me happy? And what do you think the world needs me to do? Like tough questions. And no one likes being asked tough questions, whether you're 17 or you're in your 40s. No one likes tough questions. But you have to ask those questions when you're going through the college search. Now, the best part about applying to college from here, right, is that you're surrounded by really smart kids that are going to push you. But sometimes there's a noise that comes with that. Because you start to look at their lists, and they resemble your lists, and you're worried that they're going to get in, and you're not going to get in, and that's going to be stressful. Don't worry about it. There's a space for all of you. There's a space for all of you in college 2 years from now. You know it. Don't worry about it. We don't know where the right place is for you yet. There's a lot of miles that go between the end of March 2022 and graduation next year for you guys. Let that evolution happen. Visit some schools, evolve yourself. You don't know what you want to do? Do you think when I was a junior in high school I thought about doing a job where I'd read about your torn ACLs all day? That's not what I thought I'd do for the rest of my life. I loved history. I was the biggest history nerd back at BC High. So when I went to college, I studied history. And I continue to be a history nerd. So I'm not a historian. But what do I do all day? I read histories. I read 2,205 histories. It seems like every year. Your histories. I do exactly what I was trained to do. Just not in the way I ever thought I would do it. So my colleague from UMass is right. If you don't know what you're going to do, and that's what causes stress, like get over it. Start to learn what you're good at and cultivate those skills as you go through high school. And there'll be a spot for you in college, and you'll cultivate those skills. And you know what? You'll find a job. You won't be picking through the dumpster looking for dinner every night. If you graduate here and you go through college, you're going to find that spot. Now, what do we look for in admissions? What does Boston College look for in admissions? Boston College is a decent place. Chestnut Hill, 9,000 students. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you've heard of it. What do we look for? We look for really good high school students. Well, what's a really good high school student? We might differ on the definition of a really good high school student. Because you might think a really good high school student is someone who just puts their head down and grinds out every academic statistic possible. And I would argue that that's not necessarily the best high school student. That's not the key to being the best high school student at WMA. I would contend that being the best high school student at WMA means that, yeah, you get good academic statistics. But you go to school not with your head down, but with your head up. And that you paint your face for homecoming, and you raise your hand for class, and you volunteer to do things, and you run for this class office, and you join a club, and you're great in sports, and you don't push freshmen in lockers. Like, you do everything you can to engage with that community. Because our places, whether they're big or small, universities or communities, that's the Greek root, right? We're not kennels that keep smart kids in cages for 22 hours. They're learning all the time, just like you guys out here. So I would say, yeah, we want students that are firing all cylinders academically, but not stopping when they get their midterm back and they get their grade, but building off what they learn for the next lesson and the next lesson, and building in such a way that their teachers, when they write recommendations, say, that's someone who doesn't stop learning. That's someone who's not in this to rub for a grade, but that's in it for a lifetime of learning. We ask for essays. We ask for essays not because they're assignments, because the exercise of writing is a very important exercise for a lot of colleges and universities. Putting together a coherent 650-word essay is something that an adult has to do many times. If you want a promotion, if you want a job, if you want to do a lot of things in the life cycle of your term as an adult, you're going to have to write something that makes sense. And you all have these such unique, different, appealing, inspiring stories. Tell colleges about it. I think sometimes the frustration that people have is that colleges are so competitive, they don't care. Well, we are competitive, but we certainly do care. We spend a lot of our time reading about your backstory and what you decide to tell us in the application process. What adversity you've overcome, what's inspired you, what vision you have in college. It matters to us. Yeah, well, it used to be in an interview. We used to sit in a room and I'd ask you what fruit you'd be. If you could be a fruit, you'd say, I'd like to be a banana because you're really social. And we like do that dance for 30 minutes. But now, these essays really take that place. They really tell us the story of what it is that makes you so darn different than the next guy or the next girl that I'm going to look at an application of. I'm interested. When I see your resume and see how you spend your time at this place, are you an athlete? Are you an actress? Are you an activist? Do do volunteer work and show generosity of spirit? Seeing that involvement, seeing how you're creative, seeing how you're accountable, makes you an interesting citizen to be in our campus. If you're going to come, like, let's say that you live around here and you're going to come to Boston, that's 100 miles away. You can't go home every day. So how are you going to engage with our community? How are you going to make it better? I can speak for my colleagues in this regard. We all see smart students, and we all see more students that are admissible at our institutions than we can provide admission letters for. So who do we choose? Choose the interesting ones. We choose the ones that are engaged. We choose the ones that take advantage of special opportunities like you guys have at WMA. So I can tell you all these bleak ideas of how difficult it is to get into college. And yeah, I do think that right now, the equation to get into some colleges is pretty tough. But I can also build you up and say, you go to a place that's pretty special. And if after 4 years at WMA, if the only thing you had to show for is you played one season JV golf, you're wasting your time. Because when you go to a place like this, and you have such special people and resources around you, you have the potential to do great things in college. And that's what we look for in applications. And while we can't take them all, and we can't take you all, you guys have a lot of great things around you, and I urge you, before you start looking at this process with negativity, think about what you've got around you, and think about how that might play itself out when you apply to college and what you really want out of a college or university environment. I look forward to answering some of your questions, and I urge you to get excited about the college admissions process, despite the fact that it's going to be maybe one of the difficult times when you go through in your life. Good luck. Thank you.
I just looked over at Chris and said, I hate following you. Always happens. So hello again, everyone. My name is Eric, and I am from Brown University. I've been at Brown for about 12 years, but cumulatively in my career, I've worked at a large public flagship institution, a small Catholic university, and now at Brown. So typically when I'm giving advice and talking about this process, I'm really trying to pull from all But my experiences, angles, I'm a first-generation college student myself. That means neither of my parents went to college. I navigated this process largely on my own. I went to a similar high school Chris did. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, but unfortunately, I did not qualify myself as being one of the top kids in the class, and so I felt like I didn't really have as much that I could offer in this process. And so I was really left a lot to my own devices. I sort of figured it out. I applied to, at the time, 6 colleges. I got into all 6 of those colleges, and ultimately I went to where the price tag made the most sense for me and my family at the time. And I thought that I had kind of failed because I'm thinking, oh, I'm just going to my state university. I'm just going 35 minutes away from my house. And that was the absolute worst mindset that I could have had going into college because I failed my first semester of college. I went to URI. I was like, oh, this is going to be easy because it's my state institution. And guess what? It was not easy. It was hard. The academics were hard. The teachers expected a lot of me. There's also things called the hidden curriculum in college. The hidden curriculum are things like professor office hours, in writing and tutoring centers, and other methods of support that help you figure out how to navigate that first year. And so, no matter where you go, never go in with this preconceived notion of either, oh, I'm just going here, or this is going to be easy, or I'm just going to go here and then just transfer after a semester or a year, because that's what I did, and it showed. And let me tell you, it is a lot harder to bring your GPA up than it is to bring it down. I spent 3 years just trying to get myself to a point where my GPA was good enough to go into graduate school. And so I would start off with that piece of advice as you're starting to think about colleges and what these decisions are. And speaking of decisions, our decisions just got released 4 minutes ago. I'm glad I'm not the one at the office right now hitting the button. But leading up to this moment that myself and my staff have had, it's been a lot of work. Just like Aaron and Chris have said, it's very complicated, the different processes that we all have. And something that Chris mentioned, this one word, I wrote it down over here, was the word generosity. Spirit of generosity, and generosity in all of its senses. Because that is one of those words, at least at Brown, makes a really wonderful community member. We're a competitive school to get into, and there's a lot of strong students who have been through the rigors of competition in every sense throughout most of high school. And at least at our institution, we really pride ourselves on the fact that that competition really dissolves because we have a culture where people are generous with each other, generous with their time, lifting each other up, supporting each other, celebrating everybody else's successes, not trying to one-up everyone or be the best in class or get the better grade or be the one that really knocks the curve all out of whack. So that is something that absolutely I think a lot of colleges are looking for, is that piece of community and citizenship that you can bring. And it's interesting that I haven't talked about anything quantitative as some of the most important things that you should do as you enter into this process, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in getting the perfect or the best SAT or ACT score, getting all the A's, taking as many AP classes. It's a rat race, and it's really, really difficult to keep up with. But you have to know yourself and know what you can handle, especially as you're going into your senior year and you're starting to select classes for next year. I see so many students just trying to take as many of the advanced courses as possible because they think it will look better, but in actuality, they're ignoring their college counselors and their teachers when they say, maybe 6 APs is not going to work for you. Maybe you should really think about finding some balance and trying to really know the limits that are out there. Listen to your teachers, listen to your college counselors. They know what they're talking about. They have done this year after year after year and can absolutely tell you what works, what's probably going to work well for you. So it's a fine line between pushing yourself versus also self-sabotage at that point. At Brown, we operate much like my colleagues here in a mission practice that can be encapsulated in one word, and it's a word that you're going to hear a lot of. You've probably already heard a lot of it. It's kind of a nauseating word to even say, and that word is holistic. How many of you have heard this word? Oh, not as many. Okay, well, consider yourselves lucky. You're going to hear a lot more of it. Get ready. Holistic admission practices simply means that everything that you present to us will have some level of meaning. So it's not going to be a process where it's here's your GPA, here's your standardized testing if you submitted it, and then this equals a decision. It's not formulaic. Holistic, especially in my office, means that we're really looking at you in kind of like a three-pronged way. The first is the academic way. The second is the impact, either the impact that you've already had or the potential impact that you can bring. And the last is really that writing piece that Chris talked about. We like to call it self-presentation. How are you and what are you bringing to the table through writing and through other opportunities that we give you to showcase yourself. And so the word holistic, you're going to hear a lot of from college reps as this process starts to go along. That is why decisions might be confusing when they start to come on in, and why someone might have gotten into one place and somebody else might not have, but you feel like the person that didn't get in had a stronger GPA than the other. It's because everybody has so many other things connected to them than just their GPA and their transcript. While the academics absolutely will carry some of the heaviest weight when it comes to college admission, there are all of these other things. You already heard that we see a lot of smart students, naturally smart students. And really what separates the students that we're going to select in our class will be some of those things that, I think Chris also kind of talked about, which was the generosity. I also look for natural curiosity. Brown is a place where we don't read by major. We're actually the complete antithesis of UMass in that sense, where we want you to come in and explore and figure it out along the way and not root yourself into something very early on. We're looking for people that are going to have contributions to our community that are derived from their own life experiences. And we're really proud of the fact that we can say we've got all 50 states, we've got 100 countries, we've got 75 languages, we've got, the more than 50% of our students at Brown are students of color. That is all a part of your stories and the things that you bring and contribute to the campus community. We also look for students that are expressing through their writing the openness to possibility. When I read essays and supplement questions and students are just talking about one thing and they are just so uber focused on it in one way, it doesn't lend itself to that openness that you would find at a place like Brown or a lot of liberal arts-based colleges. Now, there are colleges and places that would disagree with me and say, well, we're looking for people who are very focused and very linear in that sense. So that's really where personality of school can connect to the types of students that we ultimately select in our process. Another reason why you might be confused why someone with a lower GPA or seemingly different academic profile got in than somebody else. Right? There's so much more behind that. In our process, we're not reading by major. We're reading by territory and by school. That doesn't mean that we have specific spots for specific schools. It just helps us set your context appropriately. So when I'm reading your school, I'm looking at you in the context of your curriculum, the offerings, the grading system, the difficulty of certain teachers and classes. It helps me so that you're all kind of on a level playing field with the rest of the applicant pool. It allows me to just look at you in that individual context because I can't compare reading an application from here to reading an application from Minnetonka because it's going to be two totally different experiences. In our process, we'll have multiple people taking a look and reading your application. Usually it's the geographic assigned admission officer, and then we'll have other people chime in. Depending upon what you've expressed academically, we might have certain faculty take a look. We might have some of our alumni volunteers who work with us chime in on some things. We are in the process of even thinking about having some of our students be part of our admission committee, so there are going to be a lot of perspectives that are being put in here. We then present you to the entirety of the rest of the admission committee, and we do voting, so a simple majority wins in that sense. We try to keep it as democratic as possible, and not everyone agrees on everything. The one thing we can agree on is that the students that we're taking are typically never mistakes to have on campus. Everybody is going to contribute in one way, shape, or form. The other thing I would say is, if you are looking at specifically very highly selective colleges, I would quantify that as a place that has like an admission rate below 25-30%, where there are many, many, many more applications than they have room to take. Because really, what a highly selective school means is that we have what's called a high yield. All right. So if you have a yield of 40%, which is considered a very high yield, that means 40% of the students that you take will probably enroll at your school. So you can't take as many students as maybe a school that has a lower yield. So there's a lot of mathematical enrollment numbers and predictions and modeling that's happening on the back end that I don't have anything to do with personally. There are other people, statisticians, that deal with that as well. So what I hope you're getting and taking away is that there are so many different things that are coming at applicants that you don't have a lot of control over decisions. And when the decisions start to roll on in, please know, and this is for parents just as much as students, decisions are not reflective of, it's not a referendum on your parenting or your successes and accomplishments as a student. It truly is not. So much of the time it is we did not have room and we just had to make a really, really, really tough choice. That's all it comes down to. Just like you've heard before, by virtue of you going to school here, the question is not, will I go to college, will I get in somewhere? The only question that remains for you right now is, where am I going to go? That's the biggest thing. Where will I be? You will go somewhere, you will be enrolled, you will do great, you just don't know exactly where that is yet. So, I hope that's helpful. I hope that gave you a little bit more of a sense of all of our processes. I think Mr. Buzang is going to come up and rapid fire some questions out of us.
Thank you all. These questions are really, really not really difficult. But let's start with the question of fit. How would you define fit? And what types of students fit at your respective institutions?
Just want to go down the line.
Yeah, just down the line.
Okay. So one of the things when we talk about fit is that we talk a lot about community, and just because a school has a name that you really know, a lot of people know, or it's a highly selective school, doesn't mean that it's the best place for you, because schools need to have not just academically what you're interested in, but things outside of the classroom that will help you grow into the human that you want to be. You grow a lot in college, and you aren't in class for a majority of your time, so what other things are you going to be involved in, and what does the school have to offer in order to foster that growth? And different people thrive in different kinds of communities, and so you're looking for a school that will foster your growth and has room for you to grow, and when you do grow into the person that you are senior year, it's still an interesting place where you can learn and find new things. My best example of this, having Brown on the panel, is when I was in middle school, and the women's hockey team was like one of the first times they were in the Olympics. It might have been the first time. I was super into it. They had a lot of women on their team from Brown, so I decided that I wanted to go to Brown to play hockey. And my aunt swam there, and she got me autographs, and I was all in. And it wasn't until this panel that I found out about their curriculum. I didn't even know that the way that they did school was very different than a lot of other places, and that was on my list of play right like hockey. But it's just amazing to me how kind of close-minded that I was, and that you can be about names of the school, and knowing you really need to know how they're going to teach you, what they have outside of school for you to be for it to be the best place for you. So fit is a really important part of the college process, and it's really the best thing to do is keep an open mind as to, you might find a school that you didn't even know existed that's the best place for you. And I would say that in my experience, at least going through the college process, that was the hardest. It was harder for my parents, and then even harder for my grandparents, for that open mind. My grandmother, when I went to Trinity, my grandmother called me one time, like, "Hi, Erin." "Hey, Gran. You know what Trinity is?" "Not a Catholic school." "Yeah, I know." mind for me. And so keeping an open mind is always a really good thing, because you just might find a place that you fall in love with.
And real quick, open-mindedness is what makes someone work at DC. I think being a Catholic school in the Jesuit tradition is something that we're very proud of. Like, we have a Christmas tree lighting in December. Now, if you are closed-minded and you don't believe there's such thing as religion and you're not interested in having a discussion, hey, more cookies and cocoa for us, don't go. And maybe this isn't the right spot. And I'd also say that we have a core curriculum, so you can't come to Boston College and take 40 courses in accounting, which sounds awful anyway. What we believe in at Boston College is that the world that you're going to graduate into requires more than just one major. So we want students to take courses in philosophy, in social science, in natural science, even if that's not your strength, even if that means you leave your comfort zone. That's going to make you better as a leader in your office, as a manager of people, as a parent at your PTA. It's going to make you better. So if you want to come to college and take 40 courses in one thing, we're not your spot. And we're pretty clear about both of those. And I say this is like, you know, these schools are who we are. You know, if you're from Minneapolis and you come to Boston College and around every corner you're looking for Minneapolis, you're not going to find it. We didn't promise you Minneapolis. We promised you Boston. Boston's a wicked awesome city to live in for 4 years. You know, so we are, so you can't just bring everything you've got and think you're going to change us. We are who we are, and it's your job to find out if we can bring out the best in you, and we can accentuate the skills that you're bringing to the table. You're not going to change the college by what you're bringing, but maybe together we can make both of us a little bit better for it.
So I do think something Chris said is very important is when you're looking at your list, I mean, I think there should be at least one, if not more, but at least one common thread that all the colleges on your list sort of hit. This is more so when I'm meeting students at the student events and they're saying, oh, well, I'm deciding between you and this school that has a very rigid core curriculum. And Brown has a wildly open curriculum. And the academic experiences could not be any different from each other. And I think that's where, you know, go back to that know thyself, understand, and start to really get a vision of the kind of environment that academically that you can thrive in. The kind of two things I just say to students when it comes to fit is after it's all said and done, and again, this is more once you're admitted and you've really distilled that list down to just a couple of places that you're seriously considering. Where do you physically want to wake up every day? Do you want to be in Minneapolis or Boston or Providence? Where do you physically want to wake up every day? And who are the types of people that you want to hang out with and can see yourself being friends with and hanging out with for the next 4 years? It's sometimes just as simple as that. Where do I want to be and who do I want to hang out with? Forget all that other, you know, stuff about like the fancy things about like, oh, they have this center and this grant and this, that, and the other. You're making a 4-year commitment of your life. So make sure you want to be in that place and you can see yourself hanging out with and being friends with those people.
That's great. What advice would you give parents in terms of best practices to support their juniors, their kids, really at the beginning of this college search and planning process? What throws of wisdom out?
Best thing for parents. I would say, this is just more logistical stuff, but remember that this is not about you, and this is about them. Simple little things can eventually add up and take a toll on the student, such as you're the one that's researching when the tour is, you're the one that's registering for the tour. Let your student figure out the tour schedule, figure out where you're going to park, have them do some of the planning and logistics. I know for some of the parents, you're like, oh, my kid cannot do that. No, they're going to have to be able to figure that out over the years, okay? When you show up on campus, like your student, and students be the one, be proactive, walk up and do the check-in and say hello and say, my name is, I'm here for a tour. And parents, don't use the word we. We're taking the SAT next weekend. We're finishing the essay. we're submitting the common application next week. No, you're not doing anything. They are, okay? And it's gonna be really, 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 really hard not to. I'm not a parent, but many of my cousins have gone through this process in the past couple of years, and I have to look at my one aunt in particular, and I'm like, you are not allowed to talk about this anymore because you are ruining this experience with them, okay? So, just let them take the lead and kind of push them and encourage them to do some of that.
And your college experience is almost irrelevant. I mean, your application to college was typed on a typewriter, probably. So, you know, like your memories of the process, while nostalgic, have no relevance. And even if you went through this with an older sibling, this is a different sibling. This is one that has different needs, wants, style. It could be very different. And even in the course of 3 or 4 years, things have changed. We talked about test optional being a wave that swept over us, and how college are using standardized tests, how college are using early action or early decision. There's such different things. So as tempted as you are to use your parental wisdom, and I'm a parent, I use my wisdom all the time. This is not applicable. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn it. And not learn it from your friends. Learn it from sources like us. Ask us these kind of questions. Stay after a little bit and ask us a couple questions, and then look like a genius to your kids. Because you got it from us, rather than you got it from a soccer game or the cookout or whatever.
Talking about our relevance back to my grandmother, she used to always call me and I'd be like, oh, I'm going to this school. She'd be like, isn't that an all-boys school? Like, Grandma, I don't even know if there are all-boys schools of colleges. So like I think things change. I mean, I've been at UMass for 11 years and the application process has changed dramatically in that time. So things change pretty quickly. I would say that if you need to have conversations with your child, especially about financial options or restrictions, it's good to kind of have those conversations up front. You know, I use my personal experience a lot, but my brother got into like his #1 school. My siblings are quadruplets, so there was a lot of worry about finances, and my dad was like just so horrified that my brother got in and he wasn't going to be able to pay for it. And he always says, just had this conversation with them. But it was a hard conversation. He didn't necessarily want to have that with them until he had to. And I just think if you're really upfront with the fact that, like, you know, part of the decision might have to be financial, and so we're just going to we're going to like every school on our list, and we're going to have options, and you're going to be able to go to a school that you really like. So I think if you have some of those conversations up front, that can be helpful.
Just one quick thing. Parents, you are under no obligation to talk about your kid's application process with other parents as well. That is where I see things go sour and south really, really quick, especially if your kids are applying to the same school.
Good point. Chris, you want to start with this one? Will my child be penalized for not submitting standardized test scores? Really? What if 2 students with similar profiles, one without testing and one with very good test results, what if they apply? We'll get to it.
Hypothetically. So test scores are a data point. And there are many data points in the admissions process. How your GPA, the rigor of your curriculum, how we establish that, how we grade out your essay, both subjectively and as a piece of writing. There are many data points. So if you choose not to submit the standardized test, what you're doing is you're saying, use the other data points and give them as much scrutiny as you want because I'm taking one of your data points away. Which is fine for some people. You know, if you don't want to submit some standardized tests and you're delivering a complete application to a college, there's still plenty of data points for them to understand how smart you are. Now, if you took the ACT or SAT and you scored higher than the school's posted average, then what you do is you take a big black Sharpie marker and you write on the front of the application and you show how smart you are. If you take that ACT 4 times and you don't score anything close to what their posted average or mid-range is, then you don't submit the score. And if anybody asks, you deny that you ever took the test. I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? What do you mean? I didn't even think I have a number 2 pencil. What are you talking about? Because even as wealthy as Brown University is, we don't have the goon squad to go tip over your desk to find your ACT or SAT score you didn't send to BC or Brown. So you control the scores. You decide whether you want to just take a pass on it all and have all your weekends free and never take that test. Take it a dozen times, not get your score, and deny it even existed. Or take that test once or twice, get a score that you like, and show it. It's whether you want that as a data point among all the other data points that are going to be part of your application, and there are many parts to your application. Or you want to pass on it and tell us, you look at the rest of my stuff, and you can determine how smart I am and if I'm a good fit for your school. I can only speak for 1 year's worth of information. So the freshmen at Boston College, so our class of 25, when it turned out the enrollment, it was about 50-50. The students who submitted scores and the students that didn't submit scores. And what we don't know about the students who didn't submit scores was did they ever take an SAT or ACT. They chose not to submit it.
They didn't take it.
We don't know. Right, yeah, that's right. They didn't take it. So we were able to exist. Boston College hasn't burned to the ground. Professors are still giving out good grades. We have persevered despite the fact that half of our freshmen did not submit or take an SAT or ACT. So, this year it's still being put together. I think more people submitted because the SAT or ACT was more available than it was to those people a year ago. But how it will shake out in terms of who's going to enroll and who we admitted, still a little bit too early to say. But as an admissions counselor, I know that there were some students that I was able to admit that didn't submit a score that I feel really good about. And maybe, if I really wanted to think about it, their score probably wouldn't have helped. But I'm still happy about the admission offer that I made, and I sure hope they decide to take us up on it.
I have nothing to add.
Aaron, the first part of this question is for you, and then if Chris and Eric would care to add to it. Is there a separate application process for the Honors College at UMass Amherst? And the second part is, are there separate application processes for the different colleges or majors at your respective schools?
So personally, I wish there was, I'm sure you guys don't, but no, there is no other application. You don't even have to check a box or anything. We review every application for the Honors College, and if you qualify for it, we offer to you your acceptance letter. It's a very competitive process. We talk about the term holistic, and there are levels of holistic review, and I would say that the Honors College is very high on that scale. We kind of look at, to be in the Honors College, I always say, like, you should be above average academically. Like, that makes sense, right? Like, you should be above the average to be considered for the Honors College. But after that, it's really based on the other things that you have going for you, what kind of activities you've been involved in, what kind of impact you made in your community, what do your recommendations say about you, what did you write your essay about. Those things are kind of scrutinized even a little bit further when we're looking at the Honors College. And we also review that by major. So that's another thing to think about because, a while ago we used to do, I still remember it because it was so easy, 3.9, top 10% of your class, 1,300 on the SAT. If you had got that, you're good. And I mentioned the competitiveness of our programs. So our Honors College was full of nurses, Eisenberg, and engineering students, and that was it. And we decided that was not really what the community that we wanted in our Honors College. So now, if you're applying to computer science where someone who's applying to, undecided humanities and commerce. And so Eric talked a lot about kind of comparing yourself to others, and you just can't do that because there's so many different things that come into play. So the good thing to know is that if you really wanted to be a part of the Honors College, if you didn't get in, but you come to UMass Amherst anytime after your first semester, you can apply as long as you have a 3.4 college GPA. And the Honors College themselves reads the applications. They hate when I say this, but it's easier to get in. Last year they had like 270 applications for 200 spots. And we admit like 10% of
So in terms of, is there a separate application process for different colleges within the university or programs or majors?
No, I mean, the only thing I'd say is, do we look at a business student a little differently in terms of their quantitative, so their math skills? Yes. Not everybody at Boston College is in BC Calc. We have French majors and theater majors, and their talents are all over the place, and could also include math. But business students, math tends to be their best subject or one of their best subjects. I think business is a difficult fit if math is their worst subject. So not every business student has to be in BC Calc, but if they struggle in math, business and econometrics and statistics will be a labor for 4 years. So I would say for students who are thinking about business, and many of you are, I would think that your math, certainly have a math in your senior year. I mean, that's a non-starter if you don't have math in your senior year to apply in business school. But I would think that math should be among your better subjects if you want to be a strong business student applicant at our place, and I'm sure many others.
Yeah, we don't have a separate process or separate application for any of our programs. Much like what Chris just said, we don't have business, but one of our biggest programs are econ and computer science, which are beyond math heavy, so same rule applies. And also if you're applying as an engineering student, we have a school of engineering, but it's not a separate application, a whole open curriculum, we give you a little more flexibility. Your math really needs to be, and I hate math, but I just recognize it all table.
Okay, this is a good one. Knowing what you know now, as college admissions officers, if you could go back in time, say 10 to 12 years when you were juniors in high school, what would you suggest to yourself to ask in terms of an informative question? Like sometimes these kids in life, right, you don't know what you don't know. What questions, knowing what you know now, would you have asked as a 16, 17-year-old about any aspect of the college life?
I mean, I think college is so much better than when I went. Like, if I was depressed, and I don't mean to make light of it, but if I was down, like someone would just like hit me in the arm and say like, "Fuck up, buddy, you'll be fine tomorrow. Your girlfriend will come back around." And, like now, there's like so many people on a college campus that if I'm having a bad day, are going to ask me if I'm having a bad day. And and we want students to be open about seeking mental health assistance, or talking to their resident assistant or their peer advisor. I think it's okay to not be okay when you're a freshman in college. There's so many ways that those students can be helped, and I think a generation ago it was like, I was so smart in high school, I'm going to just go and crush it in college. No. You guys are going to run up against something tough in college. You're going to get your first 62 in a test, or you're going to not win your first election, or you're going to get cut from a team. And it's okay to not be okay. There's a whole layer of professionals that are going to make it okay for you in your first year of college. I guarantee you.
Semi-related to the last question you asked, I would say, what happens if I change my mind? Whether it's like specifically, what if I think I'm coming to the school and I'm going to go on this track, and after a year, I'm all set with that, I want to do something different. What happens then? How easy is it? How many hurdles or barriers are there? Because I imagine the way Aaron's going to answer it is very different than the way that I answer it, right? And you just have to know, clear-headed ahead of time, what happens if my 18-year-old self is different than my 19 or 20 or 21-year-old self. And am I going to be locked into something that I'm not interested in? It's just like, I remember when I was at URI, I was imagining same-ish at UMass. Like, it would be a lot easier for me to be like in the engineering school and move to like health sciences, versus if I was in health sciences and then say, I want to be a nurse now. Ain't happening, you know? So if I change my mind, what is that going to look like? And I think I'm just a victim of that from my own experience as a college student.
What are institutional priorities and how do they affect the admissions process at your institutions? And if you do have institutional priorities at your schools, what impact does that have on a student that doesn't fall within any of those areas?
I think every institution has institutional priorities. And once again, it kind of comes back to community. We want a group of people who are going to contribute to our community in all the different ways that we have. So the one thing we all have in common is that we're interested in athletics. So an institutional priority for us is to have teams that are successful and bring in attention to the school and bring money and support our community and school spirit. And so one of our institutional priorities is to recruit athletes. Does that mean if you're not an athlete that we don't have a spot for you? No. And that kind of goes with every institutional priority we have. There's a reason for them. We want to create environments that people can learn and have the best experience that they can possibly have on our campuses. But that doesn't mean that, the reason for it is that we don't want just one type of student. So there's plenty of spots for plenty of different kinds of people.
I think when it comes to institutional priority, that can sometimes be some of the differentiating factors and some of the shaping of our class that we do. So, what we do in our process is we put all of our students in the committee, we go to admit, we'll have a bank of students that we have voted to admit on, and then we say, okay, we have, just make a number, 3,500 in this bank right now, but we can only go out with 3,200, so we gotta start trimming. And it's like the worst part of the process is after these students have been enthusiastically voted in, you have to now start pulling back on some of those. And so those priorities can sometimes be reflected in that process. And priorities could be just some of the ones that we have right now. We want more women in engineering and computer science. We want more engineers that are not biomedical engineers. We want more like electrical engineers and material science engineers and things of the sort. We want to build our international population from South America. We want to build more of the middle-income students on our campus so we're not so barbelled in both directions. Those are the kinds of things. We want more first-generation college students on campus. This again is also like diversity in all of its forms. We want more serious humanists, people that want to study things like literature and archaeology and history, things that are severely underrepresented within college enrollment right now. So all of these things kind of are at play, and around the edges can sometimes shape admission decisions.
We are a diverse school community. More than a third of our students are international students. What advice would you give to the international student to further stand out in the applicant pool? It does sometimes seem that it is more challenging for some international students from countries to get into a school. What advice would you give to those students?
I think international students are far more courageous than I ever would be as a high school student to leave home and come to a foreign environment under the circumstances lately and be expected to pull the same weight as everybody else who's been there for years. It's nearly an impossible equation that international students come into, and they tend to do fantastic, and I don't think we give them enough credit. And I think at the university setting, our biggest concern about international students is that they look at like the American university system and international university systems are very different. It seems as though in Europe and in Asia, it's a professional job to go to college. And here in America, it's not a job. It's awesome. So, I think I'm not going to say we, I'll say I'd love to see international students, despite their relative novelty with the language and the culture, really immerse themselves in a high school environment like this. When I see an international student, on the football team, my mind is just blown. Or when I see them holding a school-wide office, to think, while they may be, again, newer to the community, to be able to gain traction very quickly here. And for an institution like mine, which a student has to really be committed to the humanities, at least in part, they can't just come to be a STEM student. It would be easy for a student who's new to the English language to stay within a lane which wouldn't challenge their English, mastery. But when students are able to master English at the high school level because they're new to the country and bring STEM gifts or musical gifts or other gifts, they can really stand out in that group. So I would tell my international friends here is really immerse yourself into the culture. Don't just be in the international club, or don't just be in the Asian Affinity Club if you're from an Asian country. Really be part of the mainstream community here and show that you're as invested as every other student is here, because that's what we want to see at our institutions.
The pandemic obviously limited opportunities for extracurriculars both on campus and during the summer. That must have made it more difficult to take that holistic purview. If students don't have as much of those types of investments, what's the impact on their applications?
Honestly, it was just us lowering our expectations about what we were going to see in an application. So really, that's all it came down to. It's kind of like test optional. Probably not going to see test scores, so I can't use that as a metric. So I just divert my attention to other places. I think something that we have had to remind ourselves of as admissions people is that not everybody has had the same experience that we have. Me personally, my life was not that disrupted the past couple of years. I did not have any insurmountable incidents, traumas, sickness, whatever the case is in my family. A couple of people on my staff, they cannot say that. And we have to remember that everybody has such different experiences over the past few years, whether it was relatively non-disruptive or highly disruptive. And we read that now. So, I'm seeing, both parents lost jobs, loss of life. This was serious. This was more than just an inconvenience to people. And at least the way that we are reading the applications, it's less with they didn't do a summer program, they didn't become president or captain of this, because guess what? None of it happened. It was all canceled, okay? So what I really started to look for this year was just, how did you find meaning for yourself, and how did you find joy when there wasn't a lot of that around? And that really came about in writing. I see a lot of kids that did a lot of these virtual internships and virtual this, virtual that. I'm tired of the virtual thing, and I can't imagine how you almost feel as well. So it's just setting the expectation that when we look at this, for these next couple of classes, when we look at this 2020 to 2021, 22, there's going to be a weird little gap from the way things were graded to how kids talk about their lives to what extracurriculars look like. We get it. And I think it's hard sometimes for you in your seat, because you've got this big thing coming up, to sometimes forget that we all have been through that. In different ways, but we all have had all the things canceled and all the things disrupted.
I would just add that, definitely letting us know if you were affected kind of outside of the norm, for sure, is a
Please feel free to come up if you have a question that you might have just thought of or would like to ask. We have about 10 more minutes. We have, tomorrow we start the first of 2 workshops for juniors. Listen up. Listen up. Tomorrow we have the first of 2 workshops. We're going to space them apart so we can let things sink in and simmer. What makes for a compelling essay, in your opinion, and what suggestions would you have for the students for things to avoid, perhaps, in writing about? Or what do you find to be more memorable qualities of an essay?
I think the inclination is to say, like, I pull someone out of a burning car on the turnpike and I save their lives, and that's going to impress everybody, and we never see those. I think you sort of want to aim small and shoot small, but by learning a little bit about some snippet of your life, when we pull back the camera, we actually learn a great deal. So I don't think you should go into writing this very important piece of literature. The most important thing you're going to write into your wedding vows, very likely. This is an important piece that you're going to do. But if you haven't had some cataclysmic thing in your life happen, that's okay. A lot of great things are going to happen to you after you get to college, and we hope to be part of it. If you talk about the people around you that inspire you, or the smaller adversities that you overcome, or the kids that you carpool with to school every day, and how they've all meant a little bit to your life, that's enough. I don't think you need to really wind up this really sad story about trying to engender sympathy from us so that we take you and not someone else. It's not what this competition is for. This is really an opportunity to tell us, what your backstory is, and what are the great other things that we're going to get by having you part of our community. We know you're smart, we know you're engaged, we know that people at WMA like you, but what do you think of you? So seeing that little snippet, seeing how you decided to use this spot. And granted, some of us have questions that are very specific. Like, we might want to know certain things about you, but the general common application essay is so lame and so vague, like you can write about whatever you want. And it's really an opportunity. If you look at it as an assignment, like, you're missing the whole point. If you're like, I got to write an essay, like, you've already lost it. I think you've got to look within, right? And find these little moments that, now that you think about it, actually did make a big difference in your life. I think sometimes the easy traps to fall into is, I volunteered to take care and help the kids, but in the end, it's those kids that help me. Like, I get a million of those. It's easy to fall back on the moments of community service and the moments of generosity of spirit. All of us, we could fill volumes of the people that talked about the game-winning goal, or the time that even though you're the last guy on the bench, you finally got into a game and you scored the winning goal and you gave your coach the finger behind his back. Like, we've all seen those. I don't think you don't have to hit a home run. You can hit a double. And if that double was hit hard, off the ball, and you sprinted to second base, like, you achieved it. It doesn't have to be a tale of two cities. It just has to be from you. And we know if it's been through 20 different sets of hands. We know a 48-year-old person wrote half of it. We know you shouldn't swear. You shouldn't write about Pokemon Go. Like, you should write about something that, like, look at me. Look at me. Don't write about something that I can get. Or Eric. Like, you want to write about something that general people that are trying to learn so much about you can learn just a little bit more. And we'll read every word of it, either out of professional integrity or Catholic guilt. I read every word of the essays that you write. Because, again, that's a thing that makes even kids at the same school, even twins, write different essays. That's the best part of that application, to see what you decided to go with. I'm sure my colleagues might have some different advice, but don't just let it occur, and don't just fill it out to fill it out. It's a real opportunity.
that's how we describe it. And I hope it's accurate. That's the juice of the application, right? That's the opportunity to connect with these admissions officers, even though, I mean, you met these three, which is great, but at most of the schools to which you apply, you won't meet the admission officers, but you will connect with them in a personal, and sometimes very meaningful way. So, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions? The floor is open. Okay, you guys have been great. Yep.
My name is Yuna Rowe, and first I just want to thank you all for coming to our school and giving us these amazing advices and information. As a global school, there are a number of international students at our school from all around the world, and my question is there any factors or different factors that you look for in for an international applicants compared to the domestic students?
So the question being, is there anything specific that we look for differently with international students versus domestic students? I think, and this depends upon the individual university, but the first kind of mechanical thing that comes to mind is that you might be asked to submit either a TOEFL, a Duolingo, an IELTS, some kind of English proficiency, even though you have been here, theoretically, for all 4 years or an amount of time. If English is not your first language, a lot of colleges might want to see that score. It's going to depend. Your college counselor can kind of help you figure that on out. The other mechanical thing is typically if you did not do all 4 years here, if you started somewhere else, we do want what you did before you got here. Internationally does matter from the equivalent to grade 9 to grade 12. So those are things that we do need to see as well. Those are more of the mechanical things that I can think of off the top of my head. Chris kind of captured a lot of that in his answer.
And it's kind of cool that you can draw off some different experiences in your essay, for example, that maybe domestic students or students that haven't ventured far from Wilbraham wouldn't be able to talk about. So you should feel very free to talk about where you're from, your traditions, and even though they're not mainstream American traditions, they're great things for us to learn about you and about how the importance they play in your life. And again, it's something unique to you that not a lot of your classmates would have, and you should feel really encouraged about putting that in application.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I met them before. You guys are great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.